What's up, guys? Neil Orfield here, and I'm going to show you how I will be setting up my fantasy cruncher for the Sunday night football game between the Niners and the Cowboys. I'll be setting up here for the largest field GPP on FanDuel. While you're coming in, please do like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that notification button so you can get alerts when our shows go live. All right, first thing I am going to do here is rearrange my columns. I've got a quick view saved. So now I can see in the middle of my screen the columns that I want to see, which are ownership projections, my exposure caps, my projection, and then how much I get of players once I have run a crunch. You can see here we don't have our ownership projections on the site yet because this is not the upcoming Showdown game, but they'll be coming later on. All right, next I am going to sort by projection and remove all players with a projection of 0. This is just going to save me some time when I'm making groups later. I won't have to wade through all of these players who aren't going to be in my player pool. And I just click and I'm scrolling to get rid of these. All right, there you go. Next, I'm going to go into the MVP tab, and I like to set an exposure cap here. I think I'm going to use my usual 20% exposure cap, so I can get no more than 20% of any player in the MVP spot now. Of course, you can adjust. You can use a higher number globally, or you can change individual players if you want more of them in the MVP spot. All right, next I'm going to go into advanced options, working in 2 tabs here, the general tab and the groups tab. Starting in the general tab, unique players per lineup, I'm going to leave at 1. I'm setting up for 150 set here, so I don't mind if I have some lineups that are just one player apart from each other. If you are making 40 or fewer lineups, I might recommend using 2 unique players per lineup just for the sake of diversifying your lineup set. Next, team salary, not going to set a minimum. I will set a maximum just for the purpose of avoiding the most duplicated lineups. If I'm lucky enough to win, I want to win a lot of money. I don't want to be duplicating 1,000 times, which you see happen all the time on FanDuel. There's only 5 players per lineup. There's no multiplier at MVP, so there's a lot more duplication on FanDuel even than there is on DraftKings. So I like to avoid those most duplicated lineups, and the easiest way to do so is just to leave some salary on the table. People want to default if you're hand building. People like to leave very little money on the table. They want to upgrade at positions if they see too much money left over. I like to at least leave a little bit of salary on the table just to avoid those duplicated lineups. Offensive players versus defense, the default is set to 2. I'm going to change that to 4. So I could theoretically have 4 players from one team against just the defense of the opposing team. We actually saw that win this year. Doesn't win all that often, doesn't come up all that often, but I like to have it as a possibility in my lineups if it projects well enough. Exposure cap, I'm going to leave at 100%. I already changed it in the MVP spot specifically to 20%. And then randomness, I'm going to set to 30%. If you want more control of your lineups, set a lower number here or turn off randomness completely. If you want to include a little bit more randomness, obviously turn up that randomness function. You're giving up more control, but maybe you'll get to some more unique lineups that way. Minimum projection included in calculation, the default is set to 3. I'm going to leave that at 3. If there's a player I want in my player pool who projects for fewer than 3 fantasy points, I'm just going to manually boost their projection above 3. And then finally, players from each team max, I'm going to leave at 4. So I could have 4 players from one team against just 1 player from the opposing team. All right, and then groups is the other tab that I'm using here. And my groups, the ones that I think are the most important, revolve around the quarterbacks because of the way scoring works on these sites. So I'm going to make a Brock Purdy MVP group. Going to make Brock Purdy my key player, and then I'm going to sort by position and add all of these Niners pass catchers to the secondary group here. And I am going to include the running backs as well. All right. And now, so Brock Purdy, not much of a runner. He does have a couple rushing touchdowns on the year, but he has rushed for less than 1 yard per carry on his attempts. So not much of a rusher. Obviously, those 2 rushing touchdowns indicate they're willing to use him at the goal line. Maybe he has a little bit of rushing upside there. So I think the way I'm going to handle Brock Purdy is I'm going to require at least 1 pass catcher in the flex when I've got Purdy at MVP. I'm not going to require 2. I am going to give boost to his pass catchers to make it more likely that I get to multiple in my Purdy MVP lineups. Because he does not have that rushing upside, all of his scoring or most of his scoring is going to come through the air, and on every passing play, he gets outscored by his receivers. So generally, I prefer to have multiple receivers in there and make the assumption that he's scoring fantasy points by spreading it around, throwing touchdowns to multiple pass catchers rather than just one. If he's throwing to just one pass catcher, then that pass catcher is going to outscore him because of the scoring dynamics where the receiver outscores the quarterback on every passing play. All right, next I'm going to create a Dak MVP group. So I'm going to find Dak in the MVP spot, make him my key player. And then same thing, it's actually going to be the exact same type of group for me. Dak has shown more rushing upside this year, rushing about 15 yards per game. He had showed some rushing upside early in his career, has taken a step back, but you never know. In the playoffs, maybe he steps up and runs a little bit more. Sometimes quarterbacks are more willing to run when the games really matter and the season's on the line. But I think that if Dak is in the MVP spot, you still want at least one pass catcher. So I'm leaving this rule just as is. Require one pass catcher from this group. And then once again, though, I'm going to give boost to the rest of his pass catchers to make it more likely that I get to multiple. And I'm including the running backs in these groups, but I don't think I'm actually going to give them any kind of boost. Thinking about it with Pollard, maybe I'll give Pollard a slight boost. All right, and then I'm going to do a couple more groups. I'm going to make a Purdy flex group and a Dak flex group. And all I'm going to say with these groups is if you got the quarterback in the flex, you want at least one pass catcher.
You know what I did immediately the first time I won 6 figures in a DFS contest? I converted my trial membership to Stokastic, awesome at the time, to a full annual subscription. That's because I knew these were the best tools in the industry. That was 2019, and they've gotten even better since then. Well, good news, you can get access to these same tools without winning 6 figures first with a great offer from BetMGM. You can get 2 months of Stokastic Plus Platinum when you sign up, deposit, and bet at least $10. That's every tool on the site for every sport other than Fantasy Cruncher, a $240 value. All you need to do is click the link in the description of this video, follow the steps, and deposit $10 or more, and place a bet of $10 or more on whatever you want. And when that bet settles, MGM will hit you up with how to get your subscription to Stokastic. You don't even need to win the bet. On top of all that, you also get bet insurance on your first bet up to $1,000. That means if you win the bet, you get the money. If you lose the bet, you still get your money back and site credits. It's a great deal from BetMGM and a long trial subscription to the best DFS tools out there. The legal age for gambling in most states is 21 plus, and if you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. Reminder, make sure you use the link or use promo code PLATINUMSUB or we won't be able to track you.
Niners pass catchers to the secondary group. Including the running backs. And then I'm also, because I've got Purdy in the flex, I can include the Niners pass catchers in the MVP spot as well. Okay, so I'm going to leave this group just as is. I'm not going to give any kind of boost or anything. I'm just saying if you've got Purdy in the flex, require at least one pass catcher from the Niners because, again, not much rushing upside there. Generally, if Purdy is going to be optimal in the flex, he's probably thrown at least one touchdown. One of those pass catchers is probably going to be in that lineup with him somewhere. And then I'm going to make the same type of group for Dak. And it is possible, I should say, for these quarterbacks to be optimal in the flex without any pass catchers. You see it from time to time where they really spread the ball around and then, throw one touchdown to an expensive receiver. And maybe sometimes the receiver is even more expensive than the quarterback, or just, that's the only points that the receiver scores. It is possible. It's just less likely. So I do like to require a pass catcher. Obviously, we can't cover every scenario in our lineups. Even if we have 150, there's a lot of different lineups you can make out there. You can't cover every scenario, but I'm trying to make it as likely as possible. So trying to make some plus EV lineups here. Now adding in the MVP spot as well, these pass catchers. Okay, good enough. Those are going to be my groups. So that's step one, setting your group, setting up your correlation. Step two is just a matter of making your lineups, checking the lineups, checking your exposures. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm crunching out 150 lineups. And now all I'm doing, this is the last part of my process. I'm looking at the lineups themselves, seeing if they correlate well enough. If they don't correlate well enough, I might have to go back into my groups, change some settings, maybe give bigger boosts to pass catchers or smaller boosts to running backs. There are different things you can do to make correlations look a little bit better. But that's the first step, is just seeing how do the correlations look. And I can see in this first one, I've got Brock Purdy in the MVP spot with just one pass catcher. Again, I prefer two in the flex if I've got Brock Purdy at MVP, but this is certainly viable. This could win. A lot of ways this could win. Even, obviously Purdy running for a touchdown would be one way that Purdy could be MVP with just one pass catcher. But even if he doesn't, if he's spreading the ball around a good amount, I think this could work out. So this lineup looks fine to me. We've got Dak paired with Gallup. Good to see. Purdy in the flex with McCaffrey, Debo, just Hilton on the comeback. That looks good. Here you can see Dak in the MVP spot with just one pass catcher in the flex. Again, prefer two. If I were hand building, 5 lineups, I would, if I have the quarterback in the MVP spot, I'm always just going to have multiple receivers in the flex. But in a 150 set, I don't mind having some where it's the quarterback with just one pass catcher. Purdy with Debo and Ayuk, and then CeeDee Lamb in the MVP spot. Yeah, this is definitely a viable lineup. Purdy throws a touchdown to each of Ayuk and Samuel. Dak throws 2 touchdowns to CD. Dak can't fit in the lineup, that Dak doesn't do much else, but CeeDee Lamb has a big game. Yeah, this is if it's just concentrated on the Cowboys side, and then not as concentrated on the Niners side, this lineup could work out. Down here, we've got Dak to Schultz. Looks good. Purdy with Ayuk. In general, I'd say I am happy enough with these lineups. I'm not seeing any double stacks with Dak in the MVP spot. My only real concern, let me just look at those lineups specifically real quick. All right, Dak with 1, Dak with 1. Okay, Dak with 2, Dak with 1. 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 1. 1 over here, 1 over here. Yeah, we're getting to a lot of just Dak with 1 pass catcher, which I don't love. But again, maybe Dak runs a little bit more because it's the playoffs. But what I could do here is just go back into my Dak MVP group and just give slightly bigger boost to these pass catchers. So I'm at 12% now. Maybe I change this to 14% for each pass catcher. I should have waited to do this, to be honest. Usually what I do is I adjust my exposures first, because sometimes it's just like maybe none of the Cowboys pass catchers grade out all that way. Maybe none of them project all that well point per dollar. So I'm just not getting them in my lineups, and that could be the issue. So I should have checked those first, but whatever. All right, we'll go back now, and I will crunch again now that I've given those boosts. Look at those Dak MVP lineups. All right, so now Dak with 2, Dak with 1, Dak with 1, Dak with 2, 1, 1, 1, 1, 3. All right, 1. Okay, so still getting a lot of Dak with 1, but let's look at the exposures on each player. So that's the other part of my process. Oh, and I also, okay, never mind. Let me remove the filter. Okay, that was what's going on there. Okay, so now I'm going to look through position by position and just see if I'm getting to exposure levels that I like for each player. Starting at quarterback, yeah, getting to good amount of Brock Purdy, not a ton of Dak in the flex. That's interesting. Brock Purdy actually projects better than Dak, and Dak is a lot more expensive, so that makes sense. I think so. So this is the next step, is I'm just looking, maybe making little adjustments to my projections. If I project Dak for 17, he still projects worse than Purdy at a much higher price tag. So that's not really, still not going to get a ton of Dak, but I'll get a little bit more probably. Running back getting to 23% CMC. Maybe I want a little bit more there. Just 8% Tony Pollard. I think that seems a little bit low. Give him a little boost. 5% Zeke. I want to see what his ownership projection is. My guess is that Zeke is going to come in fairly low owned, in which case I will have some interest just given his volume. give him a little boost, and then Eli Mitchell again. It's going to come down really to ownership projections. Maybe I'll get use check into my player pool, give him a projection of 3. Wide receivers, getting to a little bit of Debo, a little bit of CD, a lot of Debo, little Ayuk, Gallup, Hilton, a little bit of Jawan Jennings. Maybe I'll give him a boost. And then Noah Brown is going to interest me today. Not sure to what extent T.Y. Hilton's really cutting into his workload. I don't think that we seem to project them as though T.Y. Hilton has overtaken Noah Brown as wide receiver 3, so that's probably the case. But I still think Noah Brown's going to be on the field a good amount, so I am going to have interest in Noah Brown, I think. And then Ray McLeod, Danny Gray, they could come in play in a blowout like we saw with Kenneth Gainwell last night. Just came on the field, had a lot more snaps in the second half in the blowout. So could happen with these guys. Maybe they're worth having in the player pool in a 150 set. Tight ends, not getting much Kittle. We've seen the Kittle-Purdy connection seems to be pretty strong. Maybe I want more than 9% Kittle in my lineups. Decent amount of Dalton Schultz, not much Jake Ferguson. Maybe I'll get Jake Ferguson in there as well. A lot of the kickers, I'm going to leave their projections as is. I'll probably get less now because I've changed, given boost to projections elsewhere, but not necessarily because the dynamics of the salaries and whatnot. I still might get a lot, but let's see. And 49ers, that's interesting. So the 49ers are more expensive than the Cowboys. Guessing I'm going to want more of the Cowboys defense just because they're playing against kind of an untested rookie. I mean, Brock Purdy's been great so far this year, but hasn't faced the best competition. I think that this Cowboys defense could be a struggle for him. So I think I'm going to have some interest in playing some. Actually, I'm going to give them a bigger boost. All right. Crunch out 150 more. All right. Still getting a ton of Robbie Gould. So my boost elsewhere did not actually get rid of my Gould. Okay. Not getting much of these defenses still. Go up and change them slightly. Actually going to give them the same exact projection because I think I'm going to want more of the Cowboys than the Niners. All right, we'll see. And I've said this before. Typically, I start by giving positive boosts a couple rounds. I go through a few crunches, giving positive boosts before I come back and cut back. But I think I might just cut back on Robbie Gould right away because I can see he's only 8,500 right now. He's projecting better than the defenses. So I've got the defenses at a projection of 9. Maybe I bring his projection down to 9. I'll still get more of him than the defenses, but I don't think I want 65% Robbie Gould. Maybe you do, but I don't think that's what how I'm going to be playing it. Brett Maher, man, it's a mess. I really have no idea what to do with Brett Maher. I don't know if they're going to be willing to kick the ball at all tonight after the game he had last week. So I'm not really interested in playing a ton, but of course the field's going to be thinking the same thing. So maybe I'll probably just don't want him really defining my slate. George Kittle, I'm getting 12%. I think I'll want a little bit more. Ferguson, 5% seems about right. CD still not getting much. I'm going to give him a little bit of a boost. Yeah, 10% Noah Brown. Really depending on if his ownership comes in at like 3%, I'm going to want to be 3 or 4x the field on Brown. I think if his ownership is coming in at 25%, then obviously probably going to be under the field. I'm really going to let the field dictate what I want to do with Noah Brown. I don't want a ton of Danny Gray or Ray McLeod. I know that much. They're really only, they'll come in for injury. They'll come in for garbage time potentially. But other than that, I don't really see these guys getting all that involved in the offense. Noah Brown, on the other hand, I do think it's probably just going to be out on the field. We'll have some opportunities, so I'll want some. Jawan Jennings, maybe give him a little bit of a bigger boost. T.Y. Hilton, he can break a slate on one play. Even still. All right, I'm going to leave the rest as is. Running backs, 2% use check feels about right. I'm going to give him a little bit of a boost just to keep up with the other boosts I've given. Eli Mitchell, 3%. Maybe I think I want a little bit more than that of Mitchell. Zeke at 10%. Again, Zeke it's really going to come down to ownership. I imagine his ownership is going to be kind of low, and that'll be an opportunity. People don't really like playing Zeke. He's not that exciting. He's pretty unlikely to break off like a 40-yard touchdown run. It's really just red zone opportunities to score some touchdowns and volume that gets there for Zeke. So, but he has that volume, and people don't like playing him. So I do. All right, 52% Purdy, still 14% Dak. I'm going to give Dak a little bit of a bigger boost. And then crunch again. And this is going to be the final crunch that I do here, I think. And then I'm going to look at the lineups themselves. So rather than going through, a million times, which I do sometimes, I go through 20, 30 times crunching, but not going to do it in this video, just showing you the general process. And then the final thing I'll do is look back at my lineups again, make sure they're still correlating well enough. So I see Dak with Pollard and Hilton, like that. Purdy with Eli Mitchell, more questionable. Eli Mitchell is probably not the first pairing partner I'd go to for Brock Purdy, but I included him in the group intentionally. He did have a few targets last week. He is somewhat involved, and he could obviously score a receiving touchdown, so it's viable. Purdy with Debo and Kittle looks good. CD on the comeback. Dak with just Zeke and T.Y. Hilton. That looks good. Purdy with Ayuk. Yeah, I would say in general, I am happy with these lineups. Dak with multiple. Let's look at those, the Dak MVP lineups. So Dak with multiple, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. Yeah, so I'm still getting a mix of Dak with just one pass catcher, which again is fine. He rushed for about 15 yards per game this season. Could obviously score a rushing touchdown. Could just run for more yardage. Could break off a 50-yard game or something like that on the ground. So I think it's viable to have Dak with just one pass catcher, although my preference is still 2. Anyway, lineup's starting to look a little bit closer to the way I think I want them to. My exposures are looking a little bit closer to the way I want them to. So I'm going to leave it at that. Good luck tonight. Hope you can find some success using this or a similar process.